My entitled aunt tried to make me, at just 9 years old, sign a document to give her my inheritance. Later, she demanded to live in my house, but I taught her a lesson, and her own sense of entitlement did the rest. English is my first language. My grammar skills are not the best, so please expect punctuation and grammar errors. I'm on mobile and don't trust autocorrect. If you want to mock me, roast me with Basil and Thyme if necessary. All of this happened 5 years ago, so some parts might not be word for word, but I'll do my best to tell this story, which I think you'll enjoy. At that time, I had just bought my first home but hadn't told anyone, not even someone I was dating. It was a huge 3-bedroom townhouse, quite far from the nearest town, and it came with 10 acres of land. Somehow, word got around that I had just bought a house, even though I hadn't even moved in yet. It wasn't long before my entitled aunt found out and apparently made plans to move in and live there, despite me not having moved in myself. She didn't bother with a hello first. The very first thing out of her mouth on that call was, "Make sure you have a key for me when I arrive and move in." I was like, "Excuse me? Move in? Are you out of your mind?" She replied, "Yes, I'm going to live there, and I'll let you live there too, as long as you don't cause any trouble or make a scene." I told her no, she wasn't moving into my house, and I would kick her out if she tried. "I'm packing my things now," she said, as if my word meant nothing. "And I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning, and you'd better have my key ready." Then she hung up. As a result, I called the police, who put me in touch with the local sheriff's office. I explained what was happening, and they told me they would have a patrol check the property from time to time, remove anyone who shouldn't be there, and arrest anyone who refused to leave. It turned out my entitled aunt tried to go to the property that very night to drop off some of her belongings. However, the patrol caught her and told her to leave. When she claimed it was her house, they informed her it was not, and the owner didn't want anyone on their property. They had to threaten her with arrest if she refused to leave. She called me about an hour later, around 11 p.m., and started screaming about the sheriff kicking her out. I simply hung up and turned off my phone for the night. I woke up around 4 a.m., turned my phone back on, and found my voicemail full of repeated messages from her, raging about how I dared not answer her and let her be kicked out of her house. Yes, she actually said her house. Later that morning, I called the sheriff again and requested an officer be at the house in case she returned. I then coordinated a time for my arrival. When I arrived, a sheriff's deputy was waiting at the house. Less than 30 minutes later, my entitled aunt pulled up, her car full of her belongings. She marched straight towards me, demanding her key. I replied, "You're not getting a key, and you're not living here no matter what you believe." That's when she exploded, screaming that it was her house and she was going to live there, whether I liked it or not. I just smiled, shut the door in her face, and locked it right in front of her. Of course, she tried to snatch the keys from me, but I simply slipped them into my pocket and said, "Tell that to the sheriff behind you." She shrieked, "That's a lie! You're not keeping me out of my house!" I glanced over at the sheriff and said, "See? Told you." Then there was a loud, short cough from behind her. "Ma'am, you need to leave the property, or you will be arrested for trespassing." She spun around with a bitter expression, ready to unleash another tantrum on whoever was behind her, but instead, she choked back a sound, and her face went white as a sheet. "Ma'am, this man doesn't want you on his property. As of right now, you are considered a trespasser. You will be arrested if you refuse to leave and stop harassing this gentleman. Before you go, Auntie," she hates when I call her that, "just because you want something doesn't mean you'll get it, like my new house. If I see you on my property again without my permission, I'll have you arrested and your car towed at your expense. If looks could kill, I would have died several times over from the glares she was giving me. Even better, you won't be able to come here ever again, and I don't care if you're homeless or how desperate you are for a place to live. Now leave before you get arrested and have to pay to get your car back after it's towed." She then flipped me off as she walked to her car, which earned her a dry reprimand from the sheriff. To this day, she goes around telling anyone who will listen that I stole her new house and that she'll get it back someday. That's going to be a problem for her. Since then, I've improved the property and sold it for a good profit to a very nice couple who don't take nonsense from anyone. I then bought another property with more land, about 25 acres more. Nobody will tell her I moved. She tried to sneak onto the old property again about 3 months after I sold it, and the new owners almost shot her because she arrived around midnight, I believe, intending to get in through an open window or something. This time, she did spend about 30 days in jail, completed 100 hours of community service, and received 3 years of probation, in addition to fines and court costs for trespassing and attempting to break into a private residence without permission. I don't remember the exact charge. Her level of entitlement knew no bounds, and having a gun pointed at her was a harsh but ultimately necessary lesson. After I tried to make her understand that she wouldn't get away with anything with me, from what I've been told, she has calmed down a bit. However, she still acts entitled and is actively trying to find out where I live. I will update if anything else happens with her. Edit. This can be used in a video if deemed entertaining, as long as deliberate vagueness is maintained. Update 1. As requested, I'm posting an update to my story to provide some context as to why my aunt is so entitled. From what I recall, she has had an "I deserve it" attitude since I was a child, always demanding and refusing to accept no as an answer. Her husband left her and divorced her 3 years into their marriage because of her attitude. She refused to accept that the house they lived in was not marital property. He owned the house before their marriage, and they had to physically remove her from the house with the police due to her attitude. When my father passed away and left me a considerable inheritance, being his only child, she tried to get her greedy hands on it, claiming it was hers by right. She even tried to sue me, a 9-year-old child, to get it. She went absolutely insane when that failed and ended up serving 2 weeks in jail for contempt of court. Afterwards, she tried to forge my signature on various documents to get my inheritance. She failed because it was in trust with a lawyer at the time, and due to the attempt, she lost any claim and was removed from receiving inheritance by the terms of the will. I still don't understand how she managed to attempt that without facing charges for attempted fraud. From there, it only got worse. When I turned 18, she showed up with papers and demanded I sign them. She brought with her a sleazy lawyer who tried to tell me they would sue me and tie up the inheritance for years until I signed and gave them the money. They didn't count on me having dealt with the trust lawyer for years, who saw me as his own son and told me not to sign anything if anyone tried anything with my inheritance. She ended up having to pay her lawyer out of her own pocket and was left in debt. Since then, she has been trying to bully the family into getting what she wants and threatens to sue every time she's told no, even when she has no basis to do so. That's how she got the house she lives in now, by threatening a family member with a lawsuit if they didn't give her the money she wanted. A family member with whom I shared my inheritance bought my entitled aunt a small house just to shut her up. Then they blocked her from everything and cut contact. I also got a restraining order for being constantly harassed and threatened by my aunt. Apparently, she thought she could take my house and no one would stop her. Well, she was wrong. Throughout all of this, she was permanently banned from several local stores, including the town's Walmart and others, as well as several restaurants. She absolutely refuses to apologize when she's wrong and never, ever admits she was wrong. I didn't want to forget, but she's a professional gossip, but not in a friendly way. She's the malicious kind. Even after I sold the house she tried to forcibly take, she kept trying to get it. She almost got herself shot in the process and now has a criminal record for it. To this day, she goes around saying I'm horrible for stealing her house and refuses to admit that house was not and is not hers. She has always had the attitude that the world revolves around her and that everyone should submit to her wishes. She's a kind of Scrooge, but even colder and more avaricious. Her mother was just as bad, so I understand why she developed such a rotten outlook on life. She has absolutely no compassion for the less fortunate and even says they should die quickly, as that would reduce the overpopulation of useless people. Unfortunately, she doesn't realize how ironic that sounds. And I dare say, she idolizes figures like Scrooge from A Christmas Carol and has been heard saying things like, "Too bad Hitler lost the war." Overall, she is a very evil and entitled woman who hates anyone who doesn't share her viewpoint and who won't bend to her whims. I hope that clarifies the kind of entitlement I'm dealing with. Edit 1. Regarding her apparent obsession with me, I believe it stems from my mistake of allowing her to borrow money from me after I turned 17. She never repaid a single cent and, to this day, claims that I owe her money. I also want to thank everyone who gave me awards and liked these stories. This was read more than I expected, and I appreciate your comments as well, whether I like them or not, both about the story and the update. Edit 2. I have tried multiple times to have her declared incompetent and a clear danger to herself and those around her. However, somehow she always seems to wiggle out of it and get her way. Personally, I believe she is focused on getting the money she thinks I still have. Very few things matter to her beyond her inflated and false sense of power. Sooner or later, she will find my new address. That is a fact. And then the demands will start all over again. But this time, I'll be prepared and have a legal trap ready for her to fall into, one she won't be able to talk or manipulate her way out of. Update 2. I've been asked to post stories about my entitled aunt, so here's one of her first crazy incidents with the manager of a public pool. I will not delve into politics or discuss political matters in my posts and responses more than absolutely necessary. In other words, please keep politics out of this. If you're going to mock me, use spices like thyme and garlic. This happened when I was about to turn 17, a few days before my birthday. I went to a local public pool to hang out with my friends and, obviously, continue my attempt to win over a girl my age I was interested in. Unfortunately, I fell flat on my face in failure. She's still a good friend. I was never superficial or a player like many teenagers my age pursuing the opposite sex. I was actually kind of a nerd, but not the kind who let themselves be bullied, and more than capable of defending myself, much to the dismay and surprise of some bullies who learned the hard way. But I digress. I had been there, I think if my memory serves me, about 3 or 4 hours when there was a commotion at the pool. Then someone started yelling, "Get out of my way! Stop swimming in my path!" I looked over and groaned. It was my entitled aunt, screaming at some children for having fun in the pool, while she grew increasingly enraged because she couldn't have an area all to herself. What was infuriating her was that the children and teenagers there were completely ignoring her and accidentally splashing her with water, which only made her angrier, much to the amusement of the youngsters. Her anger reached its peak, and she started shouting and swearing, demanding that everyone get out of her pool so she could swim in peace. As I said in previous posts, her entitlement knows no bounds. Her shouting quickly caught the attention of a lifeguard, and believe me, he wasn't just any lifeguard. He was 280 pounds of solid, ripped muscle, who had most of the teenage boys and young girls sighing over him. He was as kind a man as you could imagine, but also had a "don't mess with me if you anger him" attitude. He walked over and firmly told her to get out of the pool, to calm down for a while before trying to swim again. He reminded her in a "you are not arguing with me" tone that this was a public pool and swearing was not allowed around children. My aunt screamed, "Go to censored! I'll say whatever I want, and anyone who doesn't like it can go to censored." Then he bent down where she was at the edge and simply lifted her out of the water, setting her on her feet and placing himself between her and the pool. He told her that her swimming time was over and to please exit the pool area and leave. Her response was to slap him across the face with all her might, then start yelling about assault, saying she was going to have him arrested, and more nonsense. At that point, an older gentleman appeared and told her to grab her things and get out, and not to come back. She was permanently banned from that facility. She stood there yelling more irrelevant things, but when she was told the police were on their way if she didn't leave immediately, and that she would be forcibly removed from the property, she reluctantly left, of course, shouting about sexism, lawsuits, and how she was going to shut down the pool, etc. Meanwhile, I was crouched and hidden behind some chairs and tables that the pool brought out each season. These were for people to recline and relax while children swam, or to sit after getting out of the water. I didn't want to be associated with her. I had already developed a long-standing hatred for that woman after a previous confrontation that ended with her having a bleeding nose. I was responsible for that bleeding nose, and I'm still proud of it. Later, when I arrived home, my entitled aunt was already busy telling her version and spreading obvious lies. Nobody believed her, except her mother, who was still alive. I, for my part, told everyone what really happened, confirming to others that what she was saying were lies. This resulted in her being kicked out of several family functions in the near future and virtually banned from most. Stay tuned for more stories of my Scrooge-like entitled aunt. Edit. This is the nature of entitled people. It reaches a point where they can never admit their mistakes, no matter what the facts are. I should also mention that she believes in the flat earth and is incapable of being convinced otherwise, even in the face of completely real facts. Update 3. Before I begin, I want to thank my followers for all the kind words, support, and gifts you have given me. It truly restores my faith in humanity and shows that there are genuinely good people in the world. Thank you so much. And I still have a few more stories of my entitled aunt to come. I hope and pray that you never have to deal with such a severe level of entitlement and obsession. Buckle up, grab some popcorn, and get comfortable. This is going to be a long one. It all started literally on my birthday and continued for about 2 months afterward. At that time, the protection order had already expired and had not been renewed because we had cut all contact with my entitled aunt and kept it that way since she tried to file forged documents in court to get my inheritance. It still surprises me how she didn't end up in prison for that. But anyway, it was my 18th birthday, and the party was in full swing. Everyone was having a good time, teenagers enjoying themselves in the yard, adults relaxing with their favorite drinks, everyone enjoying themselves. I had just gone out to the backyard to check on things and was having fun playing tag with them, when suddenly there was a loud commotion inside the house. I ran in to see what was happening, and there was my aunt with a sleazy lawyer, in a cheap suit, demanding to see me and yelling that I was going to sign her papers and that no one would stop her this time. My mother, whose health was already declining, was in my aunt's face, screaming at her to get out and not come back, and that she was not, and never would be, welcome there. My aunt just stood there with a smug look on her face, displaying her entitlement for all to see. She yelled at my mom to shut up and get out of the way. When my mom didn't, she had the audacity to raise her hand and slap her so hard that it knocked her to the floor. I lost control, went into attack mode, and punched her in the face with all my might, breaking her nose for the second time in her life, and yelled, "Get out before the cops get here!" My aunt got up from the floor and, seeing the murderous look I had, decided to leave. She ran out so fast with the sleazy lawyer behind her that I swear she left a vacuum in the air. But I wasn't finished. I followed her outside and yelled that if she ever had the guts to come back, I would kill her and bury her body in the backyard. On top of that, she had the nerve to call the police and try to have me arrested for defending my mother. So once again, we had to go to court and request a new restraining order. The judge saw the form once and signed it without question, having had to deal with her several times over the years for other frivolous lawsuits. Spoiler, she lost all of them. Then we were told that when my aunt received the order, she went crazy and made several threats, which led to another police visit to her house. A few days later, we received notice that she was filing a lawsuit for assault, theft of money, deception, and a bunch of other fabricated crimes, and was demanding the full inheritance as compensation for her pain and suffering. The case came to court 2 months later. During the process, she told totally exaggerated stories about how we were harassing her, threatening her life, and generally ruining her existence. During the process, the judge asked her if she had proof of the alleged harassment. She did not. The judge also asked us if we could prove that she had gone to the house and attacked my mother. Yes, we could. We had several witnesses, including a retired officer who had been a family friend for years, and we showed video of her driving into the driveway, getting out of her car, and literally advancing furiously toward the front door. My mother had installed security cameras a long time ago because things mysteriously disappeared if left outside. They weren't cheap at the time and were considered a luxury. They were large and noticeable cameras. It was impossible not to see them if you looked. She also pulled out the card of me threatening her with death, pointing at me and trying to play the victim, but she failed miserably. The judge asked me if that was true. I said yes, but that I said it in a fit of rage because she had hurt my mother and I was blinded by anger. I was given a $10 fine and 5 hours of community service, nothing out of the ordinary. I finished it in one afternoon and even made some friends. The judge dismissed her case and told her that if he ever saw her in his courtroom again with something so frivolous, he would make sure she was the one fined next, with no less than 100 hours of community service to teach her some humility. He also ruled that, no matter what she believed, the terms of the inheritance were clearly written, that she had lost any claim since the first time she tried to sue a 9-year-old for it, and that the court would show her no mercy next time. A few minutes after the session was adjourned, we were in the lobby, ready to leave, when she and the sleazy lawyer approached and said that this was far from over, that if they couldn't get the inheritance that belonged to my aunt, he would keep the inheritance tied up in proceedings and legal matters until there was nothing left to inherit. They were reminded of the new restraining order, and my mother called one of the police officers who was there for another matter. My aunt and her sleazy lawyer rushed off. True to their word, a few days later, we received notice of a new lawsuit and that they had requested a change of jurisdiction, claiming they feared they wouldn't receive a fair hearing locally because of the small-town mentality, which, according to them, dominated the area. The request for a change of jurisdiction was denied due to lack of sufficient evidence. Then they started with delay tactics, saying they were still investigating certain things, that they weren't completely prepared yet, etc. They thought this would cost us money and force us to give them the inheritance to end the problems. It didn't work because I hadn't received the inheritance yet. Our lawyer waited until everything was resolved before handing it over to me. A brilliant move on his part. My mother sadly passed away during that time in her sleep. They tried once again to make me sign papers just a few days after my mother's wake and funeral. All I did was walk to the phone, which was now mine, start dialing and say, "Hello, police. I have 2 intruders on my property who have a restraining order and are refusing to leave." They disappeared faster than I thought possible. In the end, they were forced to withdraw the lawsuit because it was obvious they weren't going to win. And yes, I was stubborn enough to let it drag on for as long as it took until they stopped. Since then, my aunt has been obsessed with getting her hands on the inheritance, even going so far as to claim I was a pedophile, trying to get the town to kick me out of my own house with that lie. Nobody believed her. The last time she was forced to appear and was threatened with serious consequences if she didn't stop the harassment and threats. Since then, the rest of the family has practically expelled her and cast her aside. Even those considered entitled no longer want anything to do with her. They're of your own kind and they don't want you. That has to tell you something. Even so, she insists on gossiping and spreading rumors about me and saying that I stole her inheritance to anyone who will listen. Nobody believes her, and yet she keeps trying. Her entitlement and obsession grew so much that she still believes she'll get her money someday and that I'm going to pay for making her suffer so much. She can try all she wants, but she will never succeed. In the end, she will die bitter and alone and will end up buried in a pauper's grave, remembered only for her boundless entitlement and obsession. Edit. She is my father's sister. That's why she saw the inheritance as her money and was convinced she was going to get it until the will was read. You should have been a fly on the wall that day. It was not wasted. She went absolutely crazy with the will. She screamed that it was fake and tried with all her might to get her hands on it while constantly vociferating that it was a forgery and that the money was hers. They literally had to drag her out of the will reading because she wouldn't stop screaming and causing a scene. I think that was the day her obsession with getting the will was born. She was already very entitled and incapable of admitting she was wrong, but from then on, she basically became resentful and vengeful towards anyone she even thought was a threat or stood between her and her money. That's the nature of her entitlement. In her mind, she can never be wrong and truly believes she already owns everything she desires. In my case, since the money was her brother's, then to her, it was hers. She cannot allow me to have what she believes belongs to her, hence her obsession with getting her hands on it. Add greed to that. I can guarantee that karma will jump on her and take a big bite out of her backside the next time she tries something. I have several legal traps set for her to fall into all by herself, including secret passwords on my accounts that she can only get from me, and my account administrators are fully aware of them. No passwords mean the police are called. Update 4. I recently learned that I no longer have to worry about my entitled aunt. Since she would never, ever admit she was wrong and also turned out to be an ardent anti-masker, she ended up catching redacted virus and passed away from complications of the pandemic. Karma caught up to her and gave her a swift kick in the backside. Nobody attended her funeral, not a single family member, not even her own children. I had told my aunt that she would die bitter and alone if she continued with that attitude towards people. It turns out that what I told her was prophetic, to say the least. As I told her, she indeed died bitter and alone. Even with everything she did, I never wished her illness or harm. I just could never trust her for a second. Here's an example of how mean and bitter she was to others. When I was 12, she managed to convince my mother to let her babysit me. Before that, my mother told me never, ever to sign any papers my aunt tried to make me sign without her being present to read it first. She tried to make me sign some papers. I refused because of what my mother told me. She got angry, went full Karen on me, terrorized me, and locked me in her broom closet, threatening to leave me there until I signed those papers. I kept refusing. She left me there until my mother arrived to pick me up. A few days after that incident and the scolding my mother gave her, She tried to submit papers to the bank that held my father's money and claimed I had signed them. The papers were rejected as being an obviously forged signature. To this day, I still don't understand how she managed to get away with that, but somehow she did, and that's just one of the many things she tried in her life. Another thing she did was try to claim my birthday presents so she could return them and keep the money. At that time, my father was alive and intercepted her when she tried to take my presents. He forcibly kicked her out of the house, and she had the nerve to call the police, claiming my father had stolen her presents. In the end, she was given a hefty fine for wasting police resources and a cease and desist order. Not even that stopped her craziness. I will post more stories of her craziness in the future, but this will be the last update about my entitled aunt, as she is no longer with us. Edit. She had been in declining health for some time, but had always been too stubborn to admit or properly manage it. In practice, she dug her own grave because of her entitled attitude. Her mother was as entitled as anyone you've read about and had an almost identical outlook on life. So much so that she pushed her husband to divorce and never, ever stopped harassing him for money and demanding things. I guess entitlement breeds entitlement. My aunt's mother repeatedly tried to have her ex-husband kicked out of his own house so she could claim it as hers. She never wanted to accept that since he owned the house and property before they got married, it didn't fall under any community property laws and was, in fact, protected against the kind of claims she repeatedly tried to impose. Each failure seemed only to make her worse and more entitled. She, like her daughter, died alone and bitter and was universally hated by practically the entire community. Before you ask in the YouTube comments, there were no more posts about the aunt. M.